Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. I'll be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hope you're all having a good start to the week, had a fruitful Monday, and that Tuesday is going just as swimmingly. For those of you who are here for our coverage of the Starlink 11-10 mission yesterday evening, welcome back. If this is your first launch with us of the week, welcome in. Despite the weather outlook from some weather apps showing a much sunnier possibility for today's launch, in reality, as we're currently T-minus 56 minutes, 41 seconds and counting away from liftoff, quite a different scene today, though. Cumulus clouds in abundance across Florida's Space Coast. Some storms to the south, moving in a south to north fashion along the Indian River. Certainly rainy on the I-95 route as you're coming up Brevard County. We're not contending with rain here at the moment at the Cape. Of course, we'll keep an eye out for that, but right now it's just cloudy and breezy. We'll talk a little bit more about the weather with more specificity here in just a few minutes. First off, I want to introduce our team supporting our launch coverage today. I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. We have our Adam Bernstein out and about, setting up the cameras, making sure that we've got all the eyes focused on the Falcon 9 rocket, getting ready to do some still photography as well. Michael Kane has this launch off, but if you're not already following the fellows on their social channels, you can find them on X and other places. On X, though, they are Aburn NYC for Adam and MD Kane Jr. for Michael. Be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We're also joined in support for this launch today by our friends P. Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Taking a look from Chuck and Jen's perspective on the Falcon 9 rocket today. I also want to thank our moderators in the live chat who are helping us out this afternoon. Thanks to Clistia Lee and Rick Donner. We'll keep an eye out for any of the other mods who may cruise on in over the course of this coverage. If you do see any of the other mods pop in, be sure to give them a hello. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube who make these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Captain Action, Sulfur for Lunch, Joni Mahoney, Dagger41, My Honey, Jeff B., and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. Also, if you could do us a favor for the 1,400 plus of you who are with us live at this point, if you haven't already, be sure to click that like button, share the stream, allow some folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we continue on through the count. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space and or spaceflight, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and that is always greatly appreciated. Speaking of great appreciation, I want to thank moderator, channel member Clistia Lee for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity. And to our newest 10 channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Clistia in the live chat, and we hope you enjoy your time as channel members and decide to stick around. With all that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline for SpaceX, the nominal pathway to a good launch of their Falcon 9 rocket coming up here in a little less than 53 minutes. Coming up at the T-minus 38-minute mark is, generally speaking, when SpaceX will conduct its go, no-go poll for the start of prop load. Assuming that go-ahead is given, fueling starts at the T-minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP-1, or rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. T-minus 30 minutes is when they start loading cryogenic helium on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. T-minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP-1 load wraps up. T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when SpaceX begins to condition the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We see that manifest visually by the so-called big vent there at the pad. Starts around T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds here at pad 40. Continues on until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds when SpaceX prepares to pivot over to that second stage LOX load process, which kicks off at the 16-minute mark. T-minus 7 minutes is when the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 rocket begin. It's when SpaceX is flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps and helps to protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. T-minus 6 minutes is when the first stage kerosene tank is full. And at T-minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence gets underway. After pressurizing for the beginning of this whole process, we'll first see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, the strong back, here at pad 40 reclines a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 3 minutes is when the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same will be true on the second stage about a minute after that, at which point the vehicle is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch T-minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Coming up here once again at 1:53 p.m. Eastern. For those joining around the world, that's 18:53 UTC, or in T-minus 49 minutes and counting. With the conclusion of the Starlink 11-10 mission yesterday, SpaceX has notched a total of 18 Falcon 9 launches so far on the year. Today's Falcon 9 launch will be the company's 19th of the year, the 20th launch from U.S. soil so far, the 21st launch by a U.S. rocket company. And of course, we've already had one launch from Blue Origin with its New Glenn rocket, as well as an Electron rocket launch from down in New Zealand, courtesy of Rocket Lab. Time now T-minus 45 minutes, 43 seconds and counting. Little less than 8 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director is set to make the call on the start of prop load for today. SpaceX does its poll electronically, so it can take that a little bit earlier than the T-minus 38-minute mark if it feels like it's in a good position to do so. But broadly speaking, T-minus 38 minutes is when that happens. Let's talk a little bit about where this Falcon 9 is going to be heading once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? After lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40, or Slick 40, over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, as has been the case with the other missions as part of Group 12, this Falcon 9 rocket will head in a southeasterly trajectory once it leaves Florida's Space Coast. First stage booster supporting this mission at B-1077 will follow that red arc that you see there on your screen and target a landing on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. It's got 2 here on the East Coast and the one on deck today. Let's just read the instructions. The booster being used on today's mission, B-1077, will attempt to make its 18th launch and landing. Once again, on the drone ship, just read the instructions. If successful, this will mark the 109th drone ship landing for this particular ship and the 408th booster landing for SpaceX to date. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece, as is the case with its payload fairings. Fairings on today's mission will float down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. The company saves about $6 million per recovery effort, so it behooves them to retrieve these fairing halves, bring them back in through Cape Canaveral, take them over to Hangar X, and refurbish them and prepare them for future flights. Time now T-minus 41 minutes and 27 seconds. Time now T-minus 39 minutes, 41 seconds and counting. As of this week, SpaceX has added yet another country, territory, or other market that has accessibility to its Starlink internet satellite service. This is what the current coverage map looks like as of today. Where the 121st to be added to this list is the country of Bhutan. You take a look, that's the light blue region that is just to the east of India there on the map, near the border with China. Just as a reminder to those in the live chat to help out our moderators here, there are plenty of forums and channels on YouTube where you can freely and robustly discuss politics and political preferences. However, we respectfully ask that this not be one of them. We are an apolitical channel here on YouTube, so if you do not want the proverbial hammer brought down from our moderators, we kindly ask you to respect that policy. Now currently T-minus 37 minutes, 29 seconds and counting. At this point, the SpaceX launch director should have made the call on the start of prop load for today. Assuming that all is moving on schedule, fueling set to begin here in just about 2 minutes at the T-minus 35 minute mark. Now T-minus 35 minutes and counting. At this point, assuming that everything is moving smoothly with preparations on the Falcon 9 rocket, fueling is now underway. We'll look for signs of that here in the next few minutes to confirm that fueling is in fact begun. If you look near the Falcon 9 rocket, just above the tree line, you see there's a branch that's crossing in front of the crew access arm that's kind of bobbing over left and right. You take a look at that and then move your eyes immediately to the left to peer at the Falcon 9 rocket's booster stage. It's right about that point where we'll start to see a frost line form as the super cold densified liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. As that happens, because of the difference between the temperature of the LOX and the comparatively much warmer and more humid Florida air, some vapor will form around the skin of the rocket as well. It's a good visual indication that fueling has in fact begun. We should start to see some evidence of that in the next, minute and a half, 2 minutes or so. It'll be a little tricky to see just because of the heat distortion that I'm sure you've noticed, the shimmering effect along the rocket, but once enough LOX is on board, it should be prominent enough to be discernible even with that. As we're keeping our eyes peeled for the start of fueling today, I do want to thank a few more folks in the live chat for their support. Thanks to my mother, Mary Robinson, joining us from hopefully much sunnier Sacramento, California, with a very generous $50 super chat. Thanks, Mom. Everyone be sure to give a lovely hello to Mama Robinson here with us in the live chat today. Also want to thank Captain Action for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Really appreciate that, Captain Action. And to our newest channel member, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Captain Action in the live chat, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. If you take a look at the Falcon 9 rocket here and you see near the base of the vehicle, starting to see that horizontal frost line form running perpendicular to the rocket. And definitely seeing some vapor now as that frost line begins to fill up. Good visual sign that fueling is in fact moving forward. SpaceX is locking into that T0 that I mentioned at the top of the broadcast. That's 1:53 p.m. Eastern, 18:53 UTC for those joining around the world. Once SpaceX begins fueling its vehicle, it's unable to alter the T0 liftoff time, so should any issue come up between now and the planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, that would result in a scrub, and SpaceX would need to stand down from launching and pivot to their 24-hour backup opportunity at the earliest. But for now, all signs point to a smooth countdown at this juncture, so we'll let you know if, in fact, that changes. Time now, T-minus 28 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. I want to thank Stephen Frazier for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Thank you, Stephen. Appreciate the generosity. As I mentioned, today's Falcon 9 flight is set to be the 18th mission for the first stage booster, B-1077. Before it goes ahead and lifts off from Space Launch Complex 40, let's take a moment, step back through time, and talk about where it's been before we go ahead and see where it's about to go. Booster first flew on October 5th of 2022, supporting the launch of the Crew 5 mission up to the International Space Station on board the Dragon named Endurance. Notable because this was the first time that a Russian cosmonaut happened to fly on board a Crew Dragon spacecraft. Since then, as part of the seat swap agreement between the U.S. and Roscosmos, the Russian space agency, there has been a cosmonaut on board every Dragon flight to the ISS and an American astronaut from NASA on board every Soyuz flight to the space station as well. Next up for this booster was the launch of a GPS satellite, GPS-3 space vehicle number 6, followed up by the launch of Inmarsat 6 F2. First Starlink mission for this booster came on March 29th of 2023, Starlink 5-10, followed up by another Dragon flight, this one a cargo Dragon vehicle, heading up to the space station on SpaceX's 28th Commercial Resupply Services mission. Followed up by the launch of the Galaxy 37 communications satellite for Intelsat. And a trio of Starlink missions. You had Starlink 6-13 on September 1st, 6-25 on October 30th, and 6-33 on December 7th. That was followed up by another trip to the space station, not with a Dragon spacecraft, but rather with a Cygnus spacecraft from Northrop Grumman. This was the NG-20 mission, which launched on January 30th of last year. A quintet of Starlink satellites followed that. We had Starlink 6-43 on March 10th, 6-51 on April 17th, 6-63 on May 24th, 10-4 on July 28th, and 8-11 on September 5th. Followed up by the Aptus X/TD7 mission. And then most recently you had Starlink 6-71 lifting off on January 6th of this year. All that leading up, of course, to what you see at the top of the slide here, Starlink 12-18. 21 Starlink satellites on board this particular Falcon 9 rocket, among which are 13 that feature direct-to-cell capabilities. Time now to T-minus 23 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. As we are awaiting the start of the big vent to signal visually that SpaceX is preparing for second stage liquid oxygen load, let's go ahead and talk about the launch timeline. This is the sequence of events as SpaceX is preparing for the launch, or excuse me, after the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. These are the nominal events that we should see leading up to the deployment of the Starlink satellites. Of course, liftoff still targeting 1:53 p.m. Eastern, 18:53 UTC. About a minute 10 seconds into the mission, the rocket will pass through max Q, or the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. A few events in fairly rapid succession follow that. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes 24 seconds, followed by stage separation, and then the ignition of the upper stage engine, the Merlin vacuum engine, to begin its first burn. The payload fairings will be jettisoned a little bit after the 3-minute mark in the mission. Roughly 3 minutes after that, the first stage entry burn will begin. It's when SpaceX reignites 3 of the Merlin engines on the base of the first stage booster to dramatically slow the vehicle down as it makes its way towards the drone ship called a shortfall. Just read the instructions is on tap today. Just read the instructions. That entry burn lasts a total of 28 seconds, setting up the landing burn to begin at T plus 7 minutes and 47 seconds. That's a burn of just one engine, which will position the booster, if all goes well, for a drone ship landing at T plus 8 minutes and 11 seconds. Merlin vacuum engine will conclude its first burn at about T plus 8 minutes 39 seconds and enter into a coast phase till T plus 54 minutes and 3 seconds, when there will be a brief 2-second burn, setting up the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour 5 minutes and 12 seconds. Currently T minus 21 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Strong back chill down is set to begin here in about 15 seconds. We'll see that big vent begin, though, in about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. There you see the start of the big vent there at the pad. Again, this is SpaceX conditioning the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. Now T-minus 15 minutes and counting. See the big vent has wrapped up. Second stage LOX load. It's about a minute some change underway. Now T-minus 13 minutes, 47 seconds and counting to the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 12-18 mission. Appreciate the 6,300 of you who are with us live at this point in the countdown. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us, share the stream, allow some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we're less than 13 and a half minutes away from liftoff. Also want to thank Trinity, aka Mama T, one of our wonderful channel members, for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Trinity. Thank you so much for your support today. As we're getting ready to see this latest Falcon 9 rocket take off, let's go ahead and talk about the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. Falcon 9, which stands about 70 meters or 229 feet tall. It has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that comes from the Falcon 9's first stage booster. Bottom two-thirds of the rocket, this particular one, B-1077 in the SpaceX fleet, has flown 17 times before, looking for flight number 18 today. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, today they're using Just Read the Instructions. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also safely housed inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by a modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 21 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. As with the first stage, the second stage also burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX. Following deployment of the Starlink satellites, there will be one final planned burn, a deorbit burn, which will help drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings, which are encapsulating the 21 Starlink satellites. Fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. Once they separate, they will splash down into the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. They'll be brought aboard a recovery vessel, brought back to Port Canaveral, then to the Hangar X site, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Now T-minus 10 minutes and counting. Time now T-minus 5 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. At this point, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. We're just about a minute away from the point at which SpaceX will begin pressurizing for a strong back retract. You'll also be getting our pad level views of the rocket courtesy of SpaceX here in the next 30 seconds or so.
Strong back retract has started.
And with that call I just heard, the strong back retract sequence is now underway. As you can hear, we're getting pad level views and mission audio from SpaceX. As you can see, the clamp arms beneath the payload fairings have opened up, and soon the strong back will begin reclining away from the vehicle as well. Starlink 12-18 mission set to be SpaceX's 232nd flight from Space Launch Complex 40, the 286th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. A little bit of housekeeping before we get to the point of liftoff. As you can see from the upper right-hand corner of the screen, our countdown clock is in real time compared to what you're seeing from the SpaceX feed, so we'll be making our call-outs based on that up until we get to the point where we're just relying on SpaceX's onboard cameras. Now less than 3 minutes to go. We should be hearing the call for first stage LOX load being complete momentarily.
Stage 1, LOX load is complete.
With that good call from SpaceX, we're waiting for a similar call germane to the second stage. Before we hit the final minute here, I want to thank just a few more folks. Thanks to channel members Chuck Close and Gunnar S. for a $25 and a $20 super chat respectively. Really appreciate that generosity from the both of you. Also want to thank Looney Lion for a $5 super chat saying, love these launches.
Stage 2, LOX load is complete.
With that call, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Shortly, we'll be hearing the call for ground gas closeouts. Actually seeing that venting here right now in real time.
Ground gas closeouts.
In the next 20 or so seconds, we'll be hearing the call from SpaceX that the Falcon 9 is in startup. The beginning of the automated sequence now underway in real time.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director's go for launch call. Should be coming here in the next 5 seconds.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that call from SpaceX, we're less than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40. "15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 12-18 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. little more than a minute into the flight of the Falcon 9 rocket. Some great work by our tracking team. Coming up on max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle here.
Max Q.
Good call from SpaceX. Next, we'll be hearing about the thermal conditioning of the Merlin vacuum engine prior to its first ignition.
Stage 2 engine chill.
With that good call, we're coming up on a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff at about T plus 2 minutes and 24 seconds, followed by stage separation, then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. Payload fairings will be deployed at about T plus 3 minutes and 4 seconds. Nico, see that stage separation? And SES-1.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
Stage 2 ignition.
Good calls, good views from SpaceX and its onboard cameras. Now a little more than 3 minutes into flight. Should be seeing those payload fairings deploy any second now. Of course, the rocket's passing by some clouds in our tracking camera view, but you see those fairings now separated, drifting away from the Falcon 9 upper stage.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Good call from SpaceX. Those Starlink satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission. Now a little more than 4 minutes into flight here. Next milestone coming up is the start of the first stage entry burn, which should begin about the 6-minute mark into flight. It's a 28-second long burn using 3 of the engines on the Falcon 9's booster stage. Some nice views of the Bahamas just off the edge of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Coming up here in now less than a week, if the schedule doesn't shift, the Starlink 12-4 mission is set to have a touchdown in the midst of the Bahamas. The first time that SpaceX is going to be flying that trajectory. Excuse me, the 10-12 mission. Correction on that. Taking a look up through the interstage there on the left-hand side of your screen at the top of the booster stack. Now back down beneath the 2 hypersonic grid fins we can see from this angle. Those occasional bursts that you're seeing in between those grid fins, those are the cold gas thrusters that help the booster to adjust its attitude or positioning. Coming up here on the start of the entry burn, should be beginning right now. Scanning the skies to see if we might be able to catch that for you, this roughly 28-second long burn.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS has safed.
Stage 1 entry burn shut down.
With the conclusion of the entry burn, we're now looking for the start of the
Stage
landing
2 FTS has safed.
burn. That landing burn set to begin at roughly T plus 7 minutes and 47 seconds. That burn will just use one of the Merlin engines on the booster stage to help B-1077 have a safe touchdown attempt.
Stage 1 transonic.
On the drone ship, just read the instructions.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And a good landing of B-1077.
Stage 2 shutdown.
Didn't hear the call for nominal orbit insertion, but assuming that was achieved following the shutdown of the Merlin vacuum engine, that upper stage now enters into a coast phase until about T plus 54 minutes and 3 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn on that upper stage engine to help circularize the orbit, setting up for the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 12 seconds. Before we go ahead and pivot to our mission stats as they currently stand, I want to thank a few folks in the live chat briefly. Our thanks to K1020 for a $5 super chat. Appreciate that. General member Stephen Fraser has been with us now for 11 months, saying go SpaceX, go Starlink. Ms. B Noodle with a £1 super chat. Appreciate that. Channel member Lloyd Green with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Lloyd. Appreciate your support. The super chat and through channel membership. Tinable with a $3 super chat. Thank you, Tin. And this is B Noodle once again with a £2 super chat saying whoop. And with that, let's go ahead and pivot to our mission stats as they currently stand. With a good liftoff and landing of the first stage booster B-1077, that marked the conclusion of its 18th flight so far. Was the 436th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 18th of 2025. This was the 380th Falcon booster reflight, with a launch of a booster that has flown at least once. No Falcon Heavies yet so far on the year, so this was also the 18th orbital launch for SpaceX in the year 2025. Was the 141st orbital launch within the last 365 days. The 232nd orbital launch for SpaceX from Pad 40. And the 286th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Taking a look at the bar chart here, where SpaceX is on the year so far. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 109th landing of a booster on the drone ship. Just read the instructions. The 326th SpaceX drone ship landing, and the 408th overall SpaceX booster landing as well. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 14th orbital launch from Florida so far this year, the 20th from U.S. soil, the 21st from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 31st from around the globe, including one from China just this morning. Here's where our pie chart now currently stands. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close things down for today's live launch coverage. I want to thank, of course, our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs for helping to provide tracking views of the Falcon 9 rocket with this launch today. Thanks to our moderators, Clistia Lee and Jeff Hansen, for helping out in the live chat. I want to thank our photographer, Adam Bernstein, for helping to shoot the Falcon 9, set up the cameras here at the press site in support of today's mission. Once again, if you're not following our photography team, you can find them at their handles you see here on your screen. Also want to thank Rick Donner for helping us out with moderating today. Thanks as well to Spaceflight Now editor Stephen Young for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you're watching from. We appreciate your time and attention and look forward to bringing you more live launch coverage coming up here in the very near future. Looking for a midnight launch at the tail end of Valentine's Day is our next flight that we have on tap from here on the East Coast. Potentially Monday for the next Vandenberg mission. You can keep up with the latest flights from SpaceX and other launch providers around the world. Go over to spaceflightnow.com, click the launch schedule tab, and it'll take you right there. Last words go to Charles Baxter with a $10 super chat. Says, thank you, Spaceflight Now. And a thanks to Stephen Peasley for a $10 super chat as well. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.